Okay, hopefully this is going to work now. For some reason, the connectioner here died. But let's see. Are we back up? Yes, we are back up on YouTube. For a second, it was. Let me just drop that link. Back over here.
Spend some time browsing our incel before it was banned, and while I didn't agree with the worst of what was being said there, I have to admit I agreed with some of it and even felt cathartic to read it. I mostly enjoyed reading the "a few millimeters of bone makes the difference between a Chad and an incel" memes.
Well, where's the enjoyment? These aren't even artistically good.
This was before I got braces and developed the chiseled jawline I have now. Even if I was basically wallowing in self-pity, it did feel strangely good to know I wasn't alone. In 2015, talk of the 2016 election started.
Okay, yes, connection problems, but I am back up now.
At the time, Donald Trump was a meme candidate. I mean, nobody took this guy seriously or thought he was going to go very far. I mean, he spoke like he was illiterate, was surrounded by scandals, and no one thought he would be president. Even if the mainstream media...
Yeah, and then the Democrats managed to pick somebody who sucked nearly as bad. And the Electoral College did the rest.
Constantly talking about him. However, as the months passed and more scandals came out, such as the grab her by the pussy comment and the KKK endorsing him, his supporters became louder.
The KKK, it's worth remembering, were divided in that election. There was also a faction of the KKK endorsing Clinton. That's how fucked up that election was. The KKK did not have a clear candidate. They actually were divided on the subject. That's how Trump was able to win.
Numerous. In hindsight, I now know that bigotry hadn't died in America like I thought when I was younger.
Wow. Yeah, he's so insightful.
It was just hiding. And now there was a...
It wasn't hiding, even. Like, you just said that you were spending time in fucking our incel. It wasn't hiding. You were hanging out with it.
Who thought like the bigots and was dumb enough to make it obvious. He didn't even bother dog whistling, so even the dumbest reactionaries knew he was on their side. I never liked Trump. I didn't even like the memes supporting him ironically. The only time I thought they were a little funny was when
no, se me cagó la conexión, pero ya está de vuelta.
Frank would do it, because that was very clearly satirical, like this for example.
You're looking kinda sexy, Donnie. You make me kinda hard, Donnie.
I still didn't care all that much about politics, but with such a divisive election on the horizon...
I mean, what gets me is that the guy with this background, who is just admitting just how completely ignorant he is on the subject, thought that it
was just inescapable. Arguments about who's better, Trump or Hillary, started in every comment section, every fake...
Which is wild, like... Actually, no. I mean, you can see how amongst reactionaries there would be arguments about that. I mean, everyone else is like, "Fuck it. What's option C, please?"
Facebook post and every Twitter thread on the internet. Back then, if you were online, you couldn't be apolitical. 2016 was a big year, and the election just became a background meme for me for a while. I got my first job at this place as a lifeguard, and when I was 16, I got my first girlfriend, and broke up with her because my parents made me, and got a varsity letter for swimming on my high school swim team. However, in July 2016, only a day before my 17th birthday, my grandmother died of lung cancer. She'd fought it for a year, but she wasn't able to beat it. She was my best friend, and actually the most progressive person in my life at the time. She participated in a lot of pro-choice marches and protests when she was younger. Because of what I now know as toxic masculinity, I felt like I shouldn't cry or talk about how much I miss missed her, even when I was completely alone and no one would see. So I didn't. I kept it all bottled up. Only a few months later, in September, tragedy struck again when a hurricane called Hermine came and it brought massive flooding with it. My whole neighborhood was flooded, under a few feet of seawater. We lost furniture, family photos, I lost my somewhat mediocre gaming PC. We also lost our whole house, so now we were homeless. Thankfully, we had flood insurance and enough—
Isn't that the one that also did for Milo Yiannopoulos' house, though?
money that we could be able to get a new place after we saved up for a while, but we needed somewhere to stay in the meantime. Thankfully, a coworker from my stepdad's job invited us to live in their guest house for a couple months. They were a very nice lesbian couple who owned a farm and had a couple of horses, and if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have had a place to stay. We ended up finding a new place and moving there with what we had, just a week before the 2016 election. At this point, the consensus was that Donald Trump was racist, sexist, homophobic, and an idiot whose supporters were—
Well, I mean, that's still the consensus. I mean, at no point was that not the consensus. The only division was between people who said that that was a reason to support him, and people who said that was a reason not to. Ciao, can hear me.
either all of those things or just stupid, while Hillary Clinton was the lesser of two evils. Well, we all know what happened election night. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. More than 1 million more Americans voted for Hillary than Trump, but because of the Electoral College, Trump won the presidency. I have to admit, I was really disappointed in my country. At this point, I was still a liberal, I was still progressive, and I hated to see that an open bigot had won the presidency in America. I didn't have my gaming PC because it was destroyed in the flooding, so I spent a lot of time watching YouTube on my phone to take my mind off the new president. But everything on YouTube was—
Wait. So he's saying that his, like, descent into the far right happened after Trump became fucking president?
either Trump won, what the fuck are we gonna do, or haha, Hillary supporters crying compilations, you know? However, there was one video on the topic that stood out. It was a video by a channel called Chris Raygun, and it was called Alrighty Then, Weekend Recap. I clicked it because I'd seen his videos in my recommended before, and I was surprised at how entertaining he was. He reminded me of a mix between iDubbbz, Justin Roiland, and the guy who made Invader Zim. I mean, seriously, come on, the resemblance is striking. Now, before I go any further, I want to clarify that Chris is not an alt-righter, a Nazi, or even a conservative. I've talked to him, albeit briefly on Twitter, and he seems like he wants to separate himself from his older content, which
Yeah, except the thing is, you don't get to be the one who decides whether some... See, this is one of the first video of his that we looked at on here, all that time ago, was him explaining why that nobody should ever question ex-Nazis who show up and want to be in leftist spaces and everything. And here he is just saying, well, you know, I'm satisfied, so...
had some really bad takes in it. In this very video, for example, he says that this clip of Richard Spencer Sieg Heiling and yelling "Hail Trump" is probably just trolling. To his credit, it's pretty obvious that Chris didn't know who the fuck Richard Spencer even was back then. I certainly didn't, and I don't think most left-leaning anti-SJWs did either.
What the fuck are you talking about? Yes, Richard Spencer was actually very well known at this point. He's talking about after Trump won the election. Like, Richard Spencer had been very present. And, you know, there was certainly a lot of awareness on the left because we celebrated the guy who punched him in the face in the middle of an interview with Australian State TV. Yes. Everybody fucking knew who that guy was.
That doesn't make Chris or any of these other left-leaning anti-SJW YouTubers completely
left-leaning anti-SJW. That is, there we go. So he's saying these are, like, anti-SJW is already not left-leaning, motherfucker. That is already saying, yeah, that's reactionary, actually. See, this is why this guy's political judgment nobody should trust. Because this is him saying in retrospect, this guy is a left-leaning anti-SJW YouTuber. Which is another way of saying he's fash.
completely innocent of spreading harmful misinformation like this back then, but it is important to talk about why stuff like this happened. I think that a lot of it had to do with the mindset that everyone in the anti-SJW community had when it came—
You mean Nazis, fucking Xanderhole. Like, we're talking about the anti-SJW community. So the people who are against women, LGBT people, they're, the people who are against, like, anti-racism, against opposing sexism. I wonder if there's a way to simplify that equation. The anti-SJW community. Shut the fuck up.
Came to the alt-right and
See,
racism.
I was beginning to give up on this video. I was actually starting to get a little bit bored with all the biographical detail. But I'm glad we stuck with it because we got that. The left-leaning anti-SJW community. What the fuck is that?
They seem to believe, much like I did, that racism and bigotry was basically dead in America. Sure, there were some individuals who held some very negative beliefs, but there wasn't any actual systemic, in the law, discrimination that was easily pointed out or spotted. Because of this, they were susceptible to mistakes like Chris made in this very video, where he's supplied with what should be enough proof to show Richard Spencer is a Nazi.
Yeah, and it was more than enough proof for most people to be well aware that Richard Spencer was a Nazi, which is why it's a little bit sus, actually, Xanderhole, that he was trying to say, oh, it was just memes. Like, literally, this guy is the head of a neo-Nazi think tank that fell apart.
But his response to that proof is basically, well, who knows? The mainstream media and the SJWs are calling everyone right of them a Nazi, and
yeah, you see, this is why you can't just trust people who used to be fash. Because what he's showing us here is that at this, like, height of his, like, progressiveness 4 years ago, he still is willing to entertain the idea that YouTube creators whose entire thing is slagging people off for opposing racism, homophobia, transphobia, whatever, are anything other than fucking reactionary grifters.
And even if he is a Nazi, who cares? He's just one guy. In hindsight, I know that hate groups started to rebrand and restructure themselves back in 2015. No one was going to support an ideology whose members march around in white cloaks or swastika tattoos screaming.
Hey, he's written this one was 4 years ago. So this is, like, literally after Charlottesville. And he's acting like, yeah, of course, obviously nobody would celebrate, like, outright neo-Nazis and Klansmen. It's like, well, yeah. Actually,
white power. So they took their recruitment to the internet, and they rebranded themselves. They didn't call themselves white supremacists or neo-Nazis anymore. They called themselves white nationalists or white...
White nationalist is not a new term, motherfucker. White nationalist was a term that existed in the 1990s. What he's talking about, this is, like, supposedly his beat. This is the thing that he specifically thinks people should listen to him about. He's previously said that guys like him who used to be fash are the ones who ought to be talking about this, that is a hill that he would always be happy to die on. But white nationalist is not a new term. It is not a term from, like, 2016. That term had entered the vocabulary before the Oklahoma City bombing. Like, when fucking Ruby Ridge was going on, that's the first time I heard the term white nationalist. Because the Nazis there were like, yeah, we're not white supremacists, dude, we're white nationalists. It's a different kind of assholes. And it's something like that. And yeah, so, he's only 20 years off.
White identitarians, or the alt-right. The more cowardly of these kind nowadays call themselves libertarians and then just dog whistle their racist beliefs to their audience. But back then, the alt-right's representatives weren't buff dudes with shaved heads wearing wife beaters. They were clean-cut, tall...
Yeah, yes, because they were recruiting from the upper classes.
Well-spoken men in suits. The trap that me, Chris, and his peers fell into was intentionally set to make people believe that Richard Spencer and his colleagues' ideas were palatable, or at least respectable.
The trap was that you watched, like, Nazi shit, and you found it palatable. You realize most people did not find it palatable? This is not an easy trap to fall into.
You would be surprised how easy it is to sway someone into defending white supremacy if you package it right.
Yes, I mean, we saw this in his argument with with Professor Flowers. She just packaged being against white supremacy as decolonization, and he immediately defended white supremacy.
Consensus among a lot of people on the left side of the anti-SJW community was that all ideas should
Okay, he's still saying there's no air quotes or nothing. The left side of the SJW community. Yeah, keep saying that. Say that one more time, motherfucker.
allowed to be safely presented, and as long as you debate them in what seems like good faith and keep your cool, your ideas are valid. You would also get the more centrist takes like, I may not agree with a neo-Nazi, but I will kill or die for their right to free speech. So I want to say again, I don't completely blame Chris for some of the mistakes he made back
Wow, that's so big of you not to blame him as somebody who did the same stuff and still lacks the insight. It's worth noting, totally lacks the insight to realize that this guy's fash. That there is no such thing as the left anti-SJW community. It's that
in 2016 during the peak of anti-SJW YouTube. I mean, if I did, I would be a hypocrite. This whole story is about how I was radicalized to the right in 2016. But it was a really weird time for a lot of political YouTubers, and most of them regret the stuff they've said. So don't go harass them on Twitter or anything, please.
What do you mean most of them? The ones that I was familiar with back then, I'm still familiar with now, and they're still pieces of shit.
So to summarize the content that Chris Ray Gun made back then, it basically made a joke out of all the things going on in politics. Most of it was completely harmless on its own, but ideas such as Richard Spencer...
We can take Xanderholt's word to the bank on that.
...is probably just a hardcore epic memer who's trolling the mainstream media, had been put in my head, even if it was a misinformed accident. I started to binge all of Chris's videos. I really enjoyed them. However, the ideas that were communicated through his content did start to change the way how I thought about things quite a bit. The best...
So wait, he's been saying this guy isn't fash, he isn't alt-right or anything, but by binge watching his content, which he was already predisposed to like ideologically, that primed him for Nazi shit. Wow, I mean, Chris Ray Gun, way to be not alt-right right there. Way to be not alt-right. That's top.
The way I can summarize my change in thinking and worldview is in two song parodies made by Chris Ray Gun himself. One is a parody of The Times They Are A-Changin', and the other is a parody of We Didn't Start the Fire. The main idea of these two songs is that back in the day, we gamers and young people in general had to deal with old, out-of-touch conservatives doing things like blaming school shootings on violent video games and technology, and people like Jack Thompson trying to get games banned. However, in the latter halves of the songs, the tables are turned, and he starts to show clips of feminists and SJWs saying that video games cause sexism and violence against women.
Well, okay, so again, what he's saying, this is reactionary content, what you're talking about here. And notice okay, on the one side, you have people who were actually trying to ban video games. On the other side, you have people who were playing video games and commenting on some problematic shit that's in those video games and saying maybe we could make better video games that don't do this problematic shit. And that is very, not so subtly equating those exact two things. Critiquing something and outright trying to ban it.
Implication of this is that back then, conservatives were the enemy of people like us, gamers, but now the SJWs and feminists were the ones that were out of touch and attacking the gaming community. As cringy as it may be, if you're a young straight white dude...
This is after Gamergate, remember. This is post Gamergate, based on his chronology. He's already seen how fucked up this right-wing gamer community is, and he's like, I want more.
Dude, chances are, if you want to take on a label and be part of a community, that label is going to be gamer. From there, the YouTube algorithm did what it does best. It recommended videos from similar creators. Around this time, I also discovered Seanhead, who made some videos that she's admitted she doesn't agree with anymore.
Yeah, although not to any great extent. She still sucks.
And after seeing all these examples of feminists and SJWs being crazy and stupid and even violent, I started to take on the label of anti-SJW, and even anti-feminist. Now, this doesn't mean I didn't support women's rights.
Yes, it does. That's the thing, Zenderhole. That's the thing. It literally means that. You did not support those things. You were literally opposing those things. This is like, there's this move you see in a lot of the court cases that TERFs have had in Britain. The emblematic TERFs. And they're trying to argue that their hatred of trans people is a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act. And so they will say, I support trans rights, of course, and apparently nobody challenges them to define what they mean by what trans rights are, just judging from the opinions that are issued in these cases. Because there's nothing that says what they mean when they say that. So it's like he's saying, oh, I wasn't against women's rights or anything like that. Well, like, how would you have defined women's rights at the time, though?
I certainly thought I did. However, I said a lot of things like, I'm not a feminist, I'm egalitarian. I care about women's and men's rights. I remember one night I was staying up late watching a Shoe on Head video when she brought up a movie called The Red Pill. This was the first time ever encountering this term besides seeing The Matrix. I never watched the Red Pill movie itself, but I did watch June's cover of it, and it reinforced a lot of my beliefs and brought up a few new ones. For those of you who don't know, The Red Pill was a documentary made by a feminist named Cassie J, chronicling her experience interviewing several prominent men's rights activists and attending several MRA rallies. Cassie comes into this...
Oh god, that sounds like a absolute... Glad somebody else did it.
Whole thing very skeptical of these MRAs, but as the documentary continues and she talks to them more, her opinions of these men changes, and she is pleasantly surprised by how nice they are. To her, they don't seem...
Oh, fuck off! That's so ridiculous. Wait, she's surprised by how nice they are? Yeah. You can have social graces and still be a piece of shit, though.
Like women-hating pigs like she'd originally assumed.
Because they were nice to her.
List all sorts of issues men face that are oftentimes not talked about in the mainstream media. Things like men's suicide rates, injuries, and deaths.
Yeah, except, okay, and this is a bullshit thing. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's true, they die by algorithm quite a lot. And more than women, but that's not because women are attempting it less. It's because they use more effective methods.
In the workplace and homelessness. Not only that, but the rallies that Cassie attends only have a few dozen MRAs, and they're outnumbered by feminist counter-protesters who are
because MRAs suck shit.
Portrayed as antagonistic and mean. They yell and picket and call the MRAs pathetic as they talk about genuine men issues. While I didn't have the money at the time to watch the movie, I saw a bunch of clips of it through anti-SJW coverage of it.
Well, which already tells you all you need to know about this movie. If, like, the far right was using it in their propaganda...
Seeing a documentary about a young, misguided feminist realizing that women actually have it way better than men felt cathartic for me. This was only magnified when I discovered a video by PragerU called The War on Boys.
Oh god. I mean, what's wild about this is he's about to tell us that this is a new thing too. That's 1990s bullshit.
This was a video of a feminist by the name of Christina Hoff Sommers.
Except she's literally not a feminist. She is a far-right anti-feminist. I mean, he's calling her this now, in retrospect, supposedly having learned better.
Someone who I now know as a TERF, who'd have thought, explaining that boys are being targeted and put down in the school system.
Which isn't true. I mean, her stuff has been debunked to hell and back. Like, I mean, her stuff was debunked in the 90s, before this motherfucker was born.
It made me feel oppressed. It may sound dumb, but as a straight white dude who's been told I was privileged my whole life, it felt good to have someone, a woman no less, explain to me that there's actually an agenda out to get me, most likely being perpetuated by feminism. I don't think this was the intention of Chris Ray Gun. Sure.
Yes, you don't think it was their intent? This motherfucker is so willing... Contrast his ability to say that it isn't the intention of these far-right creators to do far-right shit, and just to extend so much benefit of the doubt to them, with the way he talks about, say, again, Professor Flowers is a good example. I mean, in terms of people he has really just utterly smeared. I mean, this is just so fucking telling on himself.
Head or any of the other YouTubers in the more left-leaning part of the anti-SJW community, but regardless of intention, this was the result for me and a lot of other people. After watching their...
maybe it was the intention, though. Maybe the reason they were putting very specific propaganda on was to have a particular effect.
Content for a while, I started to think things...
It'd be kind of weird to assume that it's by accident, wouldn't it?
Such as Antifa is a terrorist organization, SJWs are ruining media, colleges are SJW hellholes where you will be assaulted just for being a straight white man. It wasn't like they were just telling me these things and I believed them.
Well, it sounds like you still believe them to a certain extent. At least you're willing to suggest that the people who are putting this stuff in, putting this bullshit in your head that radicalized you to the far right had good intentions. And it's like, they didn't. They're making a bunch of money telling lies to impressionable teenage white boys to get them to become fash.
He showed videos of it happening too. For example, a video of a white dude with dreads being yelled at by a black woman in a lecture hall about why his hair is offensive. A video of an Antifa member bashing a guy in the back of the head with a bike lock, and...
Oh yeah, a neo-Nazi who had showed up to attack people.
I discovered Jordan Peterson through a video by Chris where he featured a clip of Peterson
but he's one of the left-leaning anti-SJW people you see. Just platforming Jordan fucking Peterson. This is him in retrospect, I hasten to point out. This is him explaining how he escaped the alt-right pipeline. And he's sitting here looking at this in hindsight and being like, yeah, okay, he claimed that actually equality has gone too far, and the real problem is that there are people who are against racism and sexism and transphobia. And yeah, okay, yeah, he did platform fucking Jordan Peterson, but he's one of the left-leaning anti-SJWs, and I wouldn't call him alt-right. Motherfucker, what is alt-right then, motherfucker?
An argument about pronouns with a student. Through a combination of shoutouts and collaborations, and the YouTube algorithm recommending me videos with the same metadata as the ones I was already watching, I started getting into people who were a bit more extreme, like Sargon of Akkad and Thunderfoot. To my credit, Sargon wasn't quite as pathetic as he is now. At the time,
he was pretty fucking pathetic, though.
He was pretending to be a liberal and claimed he was on the left.
So many of these motherfuckers were pretending that it was a rhetorical posture that was absolutely transparent to anyone who was coming from the left. It was literally just there for far-right people. It's like when Tim Pool will act like actually he's a liberal, he's a centrist, he's politically homeless. It's just it's pure coincidence that everybody that he promotes and supports is way on the right. I mean, he has so little insight.
For Thunderfoot, he stopped doing the anti-SJW stuff a while ago, and he does cool science videos now that are actually quite good. Their content was definitely drier and a lot more boring than Shu or Chris or Armored Skeptic or The Amazing Atheist, but at this point, I was down for it as long as it had an anti-feminist slant. I believed at this point that feminism was out to get me, and not just as a straight white dude, but...
Man, feminism, it's too bad feminism didn't get him.
As a gamer. It was the anti-feminist stuff that pushed me down the pipeline the most, probably because that part started as far back as when I was 13 years old in arguments with my mom. She didn't make things any better in 2016 and 2017 either. One night I fell asleep watching an Amazing Atheist video about feminism on my phone, and she came into my room to check on me while I was sleeping. I woke up to my phone gone the next morning. I went to ask her if she'd seen it, and she began yelling at me, calling me a woman-hating misogynist.
Which is redundant, to be fair. I mean, redundant. But on the other hand, and okay, that isn't necessarily the way as a parent. I mean, I'm speaking as not a parent, I will say. I'm not a parent. I have nieces. Amazing fucking nieces. Like, absolutely coolest nieces ever. Coolest nieces I've ever had, certainly. Only nieces I've ever had, but I still think that, they're just fucking incredible. But, I mean, it seems like that's not necessarily the most productive way from a parental perspective to be addressing it. Like, I mean, I don't think I think that actually necessarily is going to push your kid into a corner that they're going to feel the need to defend, and that probably isn't the most effective approach in that situation. But yeah, I mean, I can imagine being absolutely appalled if like a kid of mine was watching this fast shit.
Apparently, after the Amazing Atheist video ended, the YouTube autoplay eventually queued up some video of a feminist getting beat up or something like that. My mom was not happy, and she took my phone away and called me a woman-hating pig. This just pushed me further down the pipeline. By early 2017, I believed that feminism was simply evil, and that they were out to destroy men as payback for the past or simply because they wanted supremacy of some kind. I binge-watched...
You mean sort of like, I mean, again, I can't help going right back to the shit he said. Sorry. I can't help going right back to the shit he said about Professor Flowers and decolonization. And, like, the way that he still accepts that that there is such a thing as reverse racism.
Sargon videos where he ranted about Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian and Brianna Wu and the evils of feminism.
God, back when Brianna Wu didn't suck. That's how old this is. This is from back when Brianna Wu didn't suck.
Destroying Western culture. At the time, it didn't seem like baseless rants to me because he always had some BuzzFeed article about manspreading to use as an example, and that was all I needed to be convinced that these people were a real problem. I learned that not only were the SJWs and feminists after me, they were after my video games too. They called gamers misogynist neckbeard losers. They said that the option to kill a stripper in Hitman or Grand Theft Auto was sexist when it's literally just an option. They scam.
It's literally just an option. I mean, like, although I will say in the case of GTA, I mean, I don't know what it was like in previous generations, but I played GTA 5 a fair bit, and literally killing everybody is an option. Like, if you have the explosive bullets and the sniper rifle, you can shoot down the passenger airliners that you see off in the background. I decided to test this out at one point while I was just playing around in cheat mode and using police helicopters for skeet shooting. I highly recommend it. It's also fun to fuck up traffic by spawning random garbage trucks. I like it, and just see how badly you can fuck up the traffic patterns. I have an interesting approach to GTA 5. But yeah, I mean, a bit fucked up.
Scam their fans with GoFundMe's asking for $100,000 for a YouTube series. They want to use a progressive agenda to inject gay people and women into video games and sacrifice the quality of the story or gameplay if that's what it takes.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, having gay people fucks up the gameplay. I don't know why it fucks up the gameplay, but I mean...
And you better believe I wasn't happy about a black guy being on the cover of Battlefield 1 because it's historically inaccurate. Oh, and God help you if you had to hear me rant about Ghostbusters 2016.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the thing is I can already imagine it because I've heard you rant about all sorts of other bullshit, and you still suck.
I had a lot to say about that. Things continued like this for a while. My beliefs started to get more extreme until I decided to stop calling myself a classical liberal. At the time, I thought that meant like a liberal who's also edgy and makes offensive jokes like in the 90s. My number...
Like you weren't there for the 90s, motherfucker.
One example would be George Carlin. I had this idea in my head that liberals used to be cool and counterculture, but now they'd all become pearl-clutching, easily offended SJWs no better than the pearl-clutching, easily offended conservatives of 2008 and before. I didn't take on the label of conservative, instead I called myself a libertarian.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, just pathetic.
And I started supporting Trump because he triggers the SJWs and the feminists who are out to get me, so why shouldn't I be out to get them? And I also started getting...
Yeah, like, see, again, this guy... I mean, I will say the thing that I said the very first time I sat down to comment on a video of his. When it was the one about ex-Nazis and is it, you know, and he was saying that you have no right to have any distrust or skepticism about any ex-Nazi who shows up in leftist spaces. You know, the thing about becoming fash is, I mean, it is a major political and moral failure to a great extent. Because a lot of people, and it is a rare one. Most people do not fall for this bullshit. Like, if you fall for this bullshit, that means you are unusually susceptible to this bullshit, or you really wanted to believe it. Neither of those things suggest that you're somebody who ought to be telling people the right take on politics.
Into friend groups that supported my views as well. Around this time, I got my gaming PC fixed and was really getting into a Minecraft server called 2b2t.org. If you don't know what 2b2t is, it's the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft. This is a server with no rules whatsoever. You can hack, cheat, say anything you want, and I mean anything.
So, not exactly anarchy as...
To give you an idea, it's often called the 4chan of Minecraft servers. It even has green text in the chat. When you log in,
What the hell are... okay, chat, help me out here. What are green texts? I have never played Minecraft.
Basically obsidian swastikas as far as the eye can see, and slurs flooding the game chat. In fact, here's a recent render of the spawn area on 2b2t where a giant obsidian swastika hundreds of blocks wide is being built by a group of a few dozen players. Now, this may seem irrelevant, but it definitely isn't.
Why would it seem irrelevant? It seems entirely on brand.
A lot of people on the right have been trying to cover up the existence of the alt-right pipeline, or rabbit hole, whichever you like to say, by claiming it's conspiratorial to think a bunch of YouTube videos can turn people into Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, how could propaganda affect people's beliefs?
And this is obviously a straw man of the entire discussion. No one's saying YouTube videos are turning people into Nazis.
You kinda are, though. I mean, you are saying that they played a major role in turning you into one, Xander Hall.
However, the YouTube algorithm is partially to blame. But one of the biggest things that pushed me further than anything else at this point...
Oh yeah, but the thing is, the algorithm, if people weren't making Nazi content, the algorithm couldn't serve Nazi content to people. So I think the content creators you keep on letting off the hook, your ray guns and the rest of those fuckers, maybe they had a bit of a role in all this.
Was the far-right social spaces. You see, on 2b2t, you won't last long on your own, so you have to join a group sooner or later. The people who you meet and the groups you join on 2b2t are interesting, to say the least. I think
he's so willing to engage in euphemism of this stuff.
the most progressive thing I ever saw on this server was this one trans girl who was part of a group called Highland that everyone would call our friendly neighborhood trap. If I recall correctly, she was
just using the slur, just right out there.
Only even allowed to join as long as she would use her feminine voice to trick the leaders of other groups into inviting her to their bases, and then she'd get their coordinates. We called this insiding a base, or a group. All the groups and people I met on 2b2t were
Hi, oh, it's a bit late. I'm going to be wrapping up fairly soon. You missed the part where my connection died on me in the middle of this thing, and then it took me like 15 minutes to get everything working again. We're looking at Xander Hall's origin story, and just how far he did not come.
A little conservative or pretending to be for social credit, while many others were full-blown, proud, and on 2b2t, socially accepted Nazis. I ended up joining a group run by a 15-year-old whose Minecraft name was, unironically, Women Are Objects. To be fair, I betrayed him and gave his base coordinates to the leader of a group called the Imperium, which
wow, you're just a regular Mordechai Anielewicz right there. He betrayed him and gave his Minecraft base coordinates to someone.
Joined and I'm still part of to this day. The thing is, every voice channel...
Wait, so he's saying he's still in the 2b2t server? The far right server, he's still in it?
Text chat that's 2b2t related was really, really edgy. I'm talking slurs being thrown around every few seconds, Hitler memes, sometimes...
Did you not just say that you're still there?
Links to videos of people being beheaded by ISIS. It was gnarly. There was even this video of a black child being run over by a train that people would often post. I found my views and my behaviors being influenced heavily because of peer pressure from friends I made on this Minecraft server, and
that you're still on, you just said.
Even just being exposed to it all the time. As time passed, I got desensitized to the worst of it, and the kind of stuff I said and believed got way worse. Sometime in August, the Unite the Right rally happened. I never watched any mainstream news coverage of the event since, you know, fake news and all. But people I watched like Sargon of Akkad, Andy Worski, No Bullshit, Gavin McInnes. They pushed the idea
he was watching fucking Gavin McInnes.
that not only were the protesters justified in their message, but the mainstream media was trying to smear them by claiming that one of them murdered a counter-protester named Heather Heyer,
Which literally is what happened. And with help from the cops. Because the cops immediately started firing explosive rounds at the people who were trying to give her first aid. I mean, that may not have, she may not have had any hope one way or another, but the cops certainly did not help matters.
who'd actually just died of a heart attack because she's an overweight feminist. I believed that, until one day a video of the event popped up in my recommended. It was footage taken from a phone, and it showed what happened to Heather Heyer at that rally. I watched as, sure enough, a car came out of nowhere and started barreling through a group of protesters. I saw her get hit. It was very obvious that that guy who was in the car killed her.
That guy is from not far from where I am right now.
Not a heart attack. This was kinda crazy for me, because I always trusted these anti-SJW YouTubers when they said these things.
Yeah, again, this is why your political judgment is not something you should be imposing on others. Like, maybe... See, when somebody is ex-fascist and they turn it into some sort of a grift, that just immediately rubs me the wrong way, because they've already demonstrated that their judgment isn't the best. And they're going to be sitting here becoming political influencers? No. Well, he said, yeah, but I mean, that group would be on the same server, though, the Imperium group. And I think he said he was literally still in it. But it is time to wrap up, and I think we might just continue on with this tomorrow. Well, actually, there's not a whole lot left, so might as well finish it tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, and he's very not, he's just not particularly impressive in terms of his willingness to acknowledge exactly what these people are. But, okay, thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My router here has this annoying thing where it will occasionally, every few months, have a fart and turn off the 5G network I'm normally on. And that seems to have happened in the middle of this stream, so I have to go right now and fix that. Reset it and plug it in and unplug it and plug it in back again. I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. US Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Good night, good luck, and fuck Xanderhall.